Namaskar and welcome to NatStrat Conversations. My name is Pankaj Saran. We bring you regular conversations on geopolitics, technology and economy. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a very special guest with us, someone who needs absolutely no introduction but has had major influence on almost all aspects of Indian life. Shri S. Gurumurthy is the editor of the Tughlaq magazine, but he's much more than that. He began as a chartered accountant, but has transcended his activities to almost all aspects of life, including philosophy, politics, international relations. He is an intellectual powerhouse and someone who speaks his mind and someone whose influence on Indian thinking goes well beyond his dealings with the corporate world, in which also he has a very major impact. So Shri Gurumurthy ji, बहुत welcome आपको and स्वागत है आपका NatStrat Conversations. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Namaskar Pankaj ji. Looking forward.
I know you're so busy and thank you for taking time out. I want to begin by asking you a little bit about your journey in your life, which is a highly complex journey, full of so many things. You are, as I said, the reservoir and powerhouse of so many things. And I don't know how you manage to cope with straddling different roles, thinking about different issues. Just a little bit about your journey and how you stand today compared to how you were as a teenager.
Looking back, my period in village where I did my schooling, completed in 1964 and came to city, Chennai, for higher education, college education. Afterwards, I felt that every step in my life was as if something predetermined. Because none of these could have been calculated, planned. Everything, every incident, every person I met, every field I got engaged was completely unplanned, unprecedented. So I always felt that I am in the hands of destiny. So I fought the emergency, went underground, then I became the advisor to Ramnath Goenka, then I became in just 2 years, I became one of the well-known consultants in tax, company law, general law. And then I had to become journalist. That was by accident. And then I was arrested. I became popular by accident. Then I began playing political roles. I was called a political strategist. That was also an accident. Then I got engaged very seriously in political activities from 1987, which lasted almost till 2014, when I decided on my own that I have done enough and I should not continue to do these things. But the entire thing, as I look back, as I said, this is not anyone's planning. It was impossible for anyone to plan these things. So, in my life, destiny played the constitutive role, and I was only an obedient student. One thing I will say, whatever I learned is not from libraries or textbooks or from great speeches of great men. It is my observation of the society. I don't think there is any greater open-air university than the society itself. Yeah. That taught me most of the things.
No, extraordinary. I mean, you have been, privy to and a participant of every phase of India's evolution as a nation, as a society, and the whole rough and tumble of politics, and never accepted any official position, as far as I know, and have just been sometimes in the shadows and sometimes right in the forefront. What is going on in your mind today when we sit today in 2024, and how do you look at us as a nation? I mean, there are many thoughts. People say everything you say about India is true, but the opposite is also true. But from a civilizational, from your own study and internalization of the historical evolution, which we discussed outside, how do you look at India and how do you see us today?
You see, unless you have a an overview of how the world has moved in the last 300 years and how India has reacted to it, its failures and successes. Unless you have an integrated view of this, we will not be able to position our mind on where India is and where the world is and where the world will be and how India will respond to that world. You see, the Indian mind, its time scale is billions of years. And the Indian mind does not believe that its life started with its birth. It has a privity of birth, and it doesn't think its life will end with this life. This kind of stability in thinking reflects in economics. I have related the faith, sociology, practices to economic output. All societies which believe in karma and rebirth have higher saving rates because they don't save for themselves. They save for their progeny. In fact, Bob Swarth was one of the Brookings Institution economists. He compared the American savings, which he called as personal savings. He compared it with the Asian savings, which he called dynastic. You don't save, you save for your grandson. Because of that, there are other consequences. That you seek safe investments. You don't want quick investments. You are not short-termist nature. You think the world will go on like this. You need not have to react on a day-to-day fashion. All this is integrated into the Indian response. So India doesn't revolt. There is no revolution in India. Because we believe that you cannot be contextual. Because we have great texts which taught us peace, which taught us patience, which taught us responsibility. Our entire civilization is oriented on duties. There is no element of right in India. There is a new concept. Yeah. So the concept of duties, as Mahatma Gandhi said, is the foundation of human civilization. That's why he refused to sign the Human Rights Declaration when it was sent to him. And he said, come on, change the title into human duties and not human rights. Duties sustain the world. So the element of duty in the Indian civilization has given a stable basis, whether it is the family, whether it is society. With the result, we have 668,000 towns and villages, and we have only 12,800 police stations. And our crime rates are the lowest in the world, whether it is murder or rape or dacoity or whatever. It's because of our respect for elders, respect for teachers, respect for women. These things cannot be constructed through education system.
But when you talk about a global society or the civilizational aspect, would you say then that we are at odds with what is called Western civilization or the rest of the other civilizations, or are we have a unique path to chart?
I don't regard that we are at variance with all the countries or all the civilizations in the world. The Western civilization was de-shaped by radical ideas, including religious. You have to conquer the world, you have to convert the world, you have to transform the world. This was never the basis of the world at all. The world existed, they had local quarrels and things like that, but they coexisted. Violence came only when somebody wanted to dominate the world in religion or commerce or in politics or power. This was more recent, in the last 500 years. Of course, it started in the second millennium. So, the world that we see is the destabilized world based on conquest and power. And it has changed. For example, colonialism lasted for 300 years. Mercantile capitalism lasted for 150 years. Communism lasted for 75 years. And globalization lasted just for 25 years. So the shelf life of all these thoughts are coming down because of the short-termist approach. Today, as a corporate advisor, I have seen corporates looking for 10 years in 10 years what we will do. What will be our result next year? Then it became what will be our next result next quarter? What will be our share value tomorrow? What will be the overnight interest rates? The world is arrested by such impractical short-termism. How China scored? It's because they had a long-term vision. They knew the short-termism is not going to succeed. So the Chinese communism, of course, shaped by Deng, looked to long-term approach. Of course, they had a government with a long life and things like that. But in India, without a state of that kind, without an ideology of that kind, the society has a long-term approach. So, it is the Indian society which is the strength of India.
So so this continuation of the civilization, unbroken civilization, is an anchor of stability.
Absolutely. You can't create it, but you are trying to destroy it. That's where my objection is. See, every civilization renews itself. For example, there was a theory that the modern civilization, that is the modernity, is sourced in enlightenment. This made the West claim superiority and the West accept inferiority. But from 2000, the third millennia, opening itself, this has been discounted by even Western scholars, that there are multiple modernities. Each civilization renews itself based on its own experience, interaction with others, best practices being shared all over the world by communication, trade, commerce. But no civilization is going to copy another civilization. India will modernize in its own way. China will modernize in its own way. There are common aspects. So the exclusivity of the Western thinking that their thought is modern, that they are universalist, their model should be applicable to all. It has failed in economics, it has failed in politics, it has failed in finance.
So do you think this is a turning point in
Absolutely.
human history? Yeah.
The West is at an end because it is at a dead end. Its sociology has failed. Imagine 55% of the first marriages end in divorce. 69% of the second marriages end in divorce. 74% of the third marriages end in divorce. And if you have 49% of the families which are headless, which are not headed by man and woman together, and the entire responsibility of taking care of the people have passed on to the state in the last 50 years. You know what is the deficit in the US universal social security system today? $63 trillion. You have nationalized the families and privatized the airports. I mean, understand the unbalanced, and that you taught as the solution to everybody. And you created the concept of unbridled rights, human rights, gender rights, women's rights, children's rights, which cuts at the root of all civilizations. Civilization is a collective virtue.
No, but do you think you are heading to a clash of civilizations?
No.
That is too simplistic.
The West will learn. You see, India never postulated class. For example, you take Professor Rammel's study. 30 years the man did research on bloodshed all over the world. Human beings killing human beings all over the world. And he found till the 13th century there was no killing in India. Except Ashoka's Kalinga war. But in the rest of the world, 1.2 billion people died. And most of them in Europe and America. Yeah. Why? Because they don't have a philosophy of life. It is anthropocentric. Our approach was nature-centric. We lived with nature, we worshipped trees, we worshipped animals. I'll tell you the most important thing. In India, we had a food problem in 1960s and 70s. But our animal population kept increasing and did not decrease. We never ate them. And we are home to 30% of bovine population of the world, 40% of the cattle population of the world, 8% of the bioresources, 18% of human population on a land of 2.4%. Do you mean to say this is an accident? This is a civilizational development.
Do you have in your mind geographical limits or features to this civilizational context?
No, the shades of it is all over Asia. For example, of course, some have shifted. For example, take for instance in 1950, the meat consumption in India, in Japan, in China, all over were the same. In India, the meat consumption is 3.1 kg per head per annum. You will be surprised. In Bangladesh also more or less like that. Because they are our cousins. Our cereal eating habit is still there. Meat is a sabji. But China and Japan, one shifted to Western ideology, another shifted to Western way of life. Their meat eating is 50 kg per head per annum in 70 years. And cereals give you 83% of the calorie value. Meat only 17%. Cereals give you 37% of the protein value. 63%. And only 13% comes. And meat gives 10 to 100 times more CO2 gas emission than cereals. That is why in such a small land, we have been able to maintain such a large population. And this we call as, that is what I told the Prime Minister, that when you say one earth, one family, it is not limited to humans. We live with animals. We worship them. You may call them animistic, you may call them backward, you may call them superstitious. But that is what modern ecology says. The Scandinavian ecology say the deep ecological consciousness. You see soul everywhere.
So here, if I can stop you, so then how would you regard, what would you regard as the Indian model of modernity? Because at the end of the day, you will progress. That is the law of nature into modern ways of life. And we, of course, define what is modern. But in terms of, let us say, material modernity, material progress, how do we then transit from this civilizational ethos into a modern, and what would you call being a modern society in the Indian context? What would modernity look like?
In 2012, $32 billion worth unused wardrobe was thrown into the sea in UK. If modernity means consumption, we reject it and we should reject it, the world should reject it, otherwise the world will not survive. The Indian life is based on trade-off. That is why we are surviving as a civilization. So today modernity means promoting wants and then chasing them to satisfy. This is completely antithetic to the very idea of environment, ecology and global warming you are talking about. Entire global warming is forced only on the supply side, how to produce green energy. But how not to pollute the earth by your lifestyle is not one of the things. In India, there is a philosophy, and the philosophy gives you the goal of life, and the goal of life gives you the lifestyle, and the lifestyle determines your wants and your habits. Habits decide what your wants and needs are, and that is why there is a continuity of relationship between the goal of life and your this thing. That is why in India the consumption is balanced. It is not. India is not an under-consuming country like China. But we have a balance in consumption. So, Indian civilization means balance. Western civilization is unbalanced. And that has gone against everything that the nature wanted us to do. And but the Western way of dealing with the world gives the Western perspective to the rest of the world. And that is the danger to the world and to the West and to the rest. So, we have now to turn. That is where India's rise is giving India the voice. Yeah. Things have changed in the last 20-25 years, as I am seeing.
And what is that a consequence of? Is that a consequence of our economic progress or of the political leadership changing, or what is the reason for this?
It's a combination. For example, India never understood the world. The world was run by power. India never understood the role of power. Till Mrs. Gandhi captured the Bangladesh, broke up Pakistan, that India could do this. Then 74 atomic, 98. Yeah. And then India became some kind of unstoppable force with one-sixth of humanity and with this kind of productive capabilities, education, and power. India understood the grammar of power late. That's why our entry, China exploded atom bomb in 1965 and got into the nuclear club. We missed it. And so many things we missed. We are late entrants, but I'm not worried about it. But because others have learnt wrong things which they will not be able to undo. For example, some of the things which China has learnt from the West is likely to harm China. But we are in a position to civilizationally handle these things. My view is India will be the subject of study in future.
That's fantastic. I mean, we can already see signs of that, but that has a flip side where you come under the scrutiny and under the magnifying glass, and people who are not able to understand India have very different and negative and critical interpretations of India because maybe they can't understand. I mean, we discussed the end of history thesis, which has proved to be so wrong, but at that time it was considered to be the gospel truth of this great intellectual. But so we will have that also, where you will come under criticism.
You see, I think there will be both, because those who see the Newtonian world will criticize India. The Newtonian world has been disproved long ago. That all that you see is real has been disproved by atomic science. That everything is atom. Nobody will believe if we are told that we are just collections of atom moving at a particular wave. It has been proved that we are only collection of atom. And then Big Bang theory came, that where all this came, just a millionth of an atom generated heat, and that is what the world is. And then before that, what happened? So many quantum scientists began saying the answer is only in the Vedas, which has talked about creation. Nobody believed them. Our people did not even study them. When I used to lecture in IIT, they didn't even know Schrödinger said this or Heisenberg said this, Heisenberg said this. But in 2020, Nobel Prize has been given to Roger Penrose, who was part of the team which studied the Big Bang theory along with Stephen Hawking. He said a pre-existing universal consciousness which cannot be captured by mathematical formulation produced matter. So, world will study this because everything is interrelated. It's not that what is happening in this world is decided only by this world. The entire universe plays a role because there is one connectivity, one soul, one influence, one consciousness is going to come.
So I think the world needs to hear more of what you've just said in terms of how the Indian civilizational ethic and consciousness approaches life itself. But can I transit now to a little more on the, let us say, concrete things, away from the abstract? What I want to ask you is your view on what nature and shape is the Indian economy in the most optimum fashion. What should it be and what should it take? For example, there are, debates. We should be a services economy, a manufacturing economy. We should be indigenous in terms of everything, but we should also integrate with supply chains globally. How are you seeing all this? I mean, what is your sense of all these debates?
When globalization was swept us like a wave, a tsunami, I said this is not going to last. Because there cannot be globalization without global governance. There cannot be global governance without global leadership. You cannot have global leadership without a global philosophy. You cannot have your private leadership and govern the philosophy and govern the world. For example, take America for instance. I used to discuss with the American diplomats in 1990s. I still remember when Silberstein used to come and meet me. I used to tell him, you don't have the psychology or the philosophy to be the global leader. You know why? You are 10,000 kilometers away from any danger. Every other country lives in danger. You can't understand living in danger. And you think your isolation gives you power. And that does not give you the leadership quality. You must understand others' problems. Your civilization, your geography, your politics, your history does not give you that approach. Second thing is, you don't have a philosophy for the world. We have a philosophy. that you have to coexist with everything on this earth, not only humans, but everything. You need such a philosophy to govern the world. With a sectional philosophy, you cannot govern the universal world. That's where the West failed. West did not have empathy for the world. With the result, the collapse of the Western order is seen as the collapse of the world order. No, we will go through a change.
No, I remember once I told you also when you said 2008 was not the global financial crisis, it was the Western financial
Western financial, American financial crisis. It's not even Western. It's US consumerist household debt crisis.
So then, coming back to this whole business of how the shape and the frame of the Indian economy.
I'll answer the question. The global economy is not going to be what it was in 2020 when this COVID struck and then Ukraine war came. Global supply chain has ended. Cheap supply chains will transform into safe supply chains. This multilateralism will turn into plurilateralism and bilateralism. Global costs will go up. Economic growth will have to be adjusted to not exploiting the cheap source, but paying for the safe source. So this will be the transformation which will be taking place. This means that American consumers cannot be exploited by Chinese producers. See, these changes are bound to take place because the reality is now hitting the world. Only economics cannot determine the... So, in this, the greatest asset of India is its soft power. That it is no danger to anyone, including the people who regard India as adversaries. India is not an adversary of anybody. For example, you remove India as the adversary of Pakistan. Pakistan can't exist because its nationalism is to hate India. China's hatred of India, I wouldn't call it hatred of India, China's dislike for India is that India commands respect. Even in China, you know Hu Shi's statement. 2000 years we kept them dominated. He called it as the reason for the fall of China. So the idea that India's rise will be the rise of somebody who is respectable on our borders is not something. There is no civilizational clash between us and China. But it is political. It is geopolitical. And we have to handle it through our own relationship and our own formulation of relationship with others.
So then coming to shifting a little bit to the outside world then, I mean, from what you're saying, if this is where we are, then our primary and fundamental geostrategic challenge seems to be China. Would you agree with that? And
is it yes and no?
Or is it more than that?
It is yes and no. China and India will have a psychological war. I don't think they will have a real war. Because any war on the borders will be nobody is a winner or a loser. But I don't think either China or India has any inclination to move beyond borders. If such a war comes, it will not be limited to China and India. So I think it's a psychological war, it's an economic war, it's a political war, it's a cultural, approaches, politically cultural approaches. I think we should think of a civilizational approach to China. The civilizational approach to China. They connect to the Chinese people's consciousness. You cannot connect to Pakistan people's consciousness because there is an intense hatred of Islamic inclinations against India, which is still regarded as a Hindu dominant country. There is no such complication with China. So I think we should promote large-scale civilizational underpinning, not just trade. Trade, you may use trade for civilization. I think we should have a larger, because China has also a stake in India.
But do you see a prospect in some future time when we actually move in this direction and India and China are able to live like two normal neighbors?
It should be possible because if the role, the dominant constitutive role that the West is playing, this is going to be an intermediating factor between us and China. This is what I think. Because when the West declines. West has to decline because of various reasons, from demography to economics to savings to borrowing. And in fact, the kind of borrowings that America has made, it is an irredeemable borrowing from within and outside. As I said,
So that brings to the question of the US dollar as the currency and so on.
See, that is why Trump's declaration that he will tax nations which don't use dollars is a factor that it has ceased to be an economic instrument. It is a political power. Who is going to tolerate it? Nobody will tolerate it. And if you become an intolerable nation, you will become an intolerable economy also. I think it's foolish. America is giving up all its soft power and going into hardness, which happened during the Ukraine response. I mean, they are in a huge intellectual crisis.
And leadership crisis.
Obviously. And the way democracy is leading them to short-termism and the political leadership is answering to short-termism.
So do they have a thesis for the world? It seems
No,
somehow they do not.
They don't have a thesis for themselves. If 60% of the Republicans will not give their daughters and sons to Democrats and vice versa, you can understand the politics. You see, the DMK and ADMK may clash and Congress and BJP may clash, but still marriages will take place between this. The Pew Research said this social cohesion is not there in America. That is the problem of America.
But then if you have a America which is unstable, that is going to further complicate.
No, that will be a short-term problem, maybe 5 years or 10 years. But if there is a problem in China, it will be a large-scale problem. For example, as I see, Chinese state system is unsustainable in the world. There are 45 million Chinese outside China, each of them relating to 10 persons, telling them about how freedom is, what they are enjoying in life. That is a time bomb ticking under them. So China's shift will be more dangerous than the American shift because America is, after all, isolated. It may affect technology growth, it may affect...
So do you think this situation has got aggravated with the Ukraine war?
You see, Ukraine war has exposed America's political incompetence. Because they built this necessity for Ukraine war over a period of 30 years. And they produced Putin, you created Putin, and you are no... You know one thing, you can never put a pawn in the war unless you don't have the guts to get into the war.
Correct.
And you put a pawn.
Correct. A proxy.
And the pawn is now running away.
Yeah.
See, I don't think they had the intellectual strength foresight to understand that they were launching Ukraine into war whom they cannot recover.
So what does this speak for, let's say, the future of the East-West relationship? Is it a breakdown? Is it going to spiral in a much worse situation? You know, what we saw in the Cold War time, I mean, is it going to be, is it a breakdown which is for good between the US and the West and Russia?
You see, actually, it will not be like the Cold War situation or the pre-war situation. Things have changed enormously because, in my view, very few countries have appetite for war today. No country has a conscript army. No country has a conscripting ideology. People are enjoying their life. They want standard of living. And so, nobody will launch into a war very easily, unless some mad Hamas or somebody. You see from 1967 how Arabs have changed. They all said, we will finish Israel. Now everybody is shaking hands.
It's a full transformation of the situation.
In fact, when everybody said that China is going to attack Taiwan, I said they will never attack. Because Taiwan has missiles pointed at the east coast, which can demolish China in the first half a day. Afterwards, it may take 25 years for China to build. Do they not know it?
And if China does something in Taiwan, I was reading your book, it will be the biggest disaster. For the communist.
In fact, I had argued with many of our diplomats who said this action is imminent.
No, I don't think so.
No country can act against any country at will today. Because there is too much of interconnection.
So, do you think the Indian role in this kind of a situation is a valid role? Do you think there is a role?
Yes.
Do you think we should play that role?
Yes. You see, if only we had not taken the decision to abstain from voting on Ukraine, it would have been a disaster for India and the world. And don't think the Prime Minister had 4 days to decide. He had 4 hours to decide. And our buying oil from Russia, it stabilized the Indian economy and world oil economy. It prevented another depression in the world. America wanted the oil prices to go beyond 200 because America had become an exporter of oil in 2018.
Correct. Shale gas and all that, yeah.
So their calculation of Ukraine war went wrong everywhere.
So we have a possibility to contribute to some stoppage of the war.
It is because everybody wants to stop the war and they only want who will do it. Ukraine wants the war stopped. America wants the war stopped. Europe wants the war stopped day before yesterday. Russia wants the war stopped today. So they are only looking for who is the panchayati.
Correct. That's fantastic. We haven't discussed the neighborhood, but maybe we'll do that again because I've already taken a lot of your time. But this is a fantastic survey and a bird's eye view of so many issues. But
Yes.
thank you so much.
Because I am not a specialist.
No, but you are speaking on everything as we expected you to, and such fantastic insights. I want to thank you really once again for spending so much time. Any last thoughts which you would like to share, which come to your mind as we speak, as we sit today about, say,
You see,
about
I
India,
would put
about-
it,
yeah.
it may not be, what I am saying may look abstract, but it is not abstract. The world of ideology will become a world of philosophy. Ideology means I am right, you are wrong. This has been driving the world for 2000 years. And more in the last 500 years, 300 years, 200 years, 50 years, 25 years. Because I have seen the shift. I am right, you are wrong. What I am thinking is right, what you are thinking is wrong. My way of life is right, your way of life is wrong. My language is right, your language is wrong. India always had another approach. I am right, I think maybe you have a point. This is philosophy. You know who made this distinction? It's not a philosopher. It is Bill Clinton who spoke this in 2007. I was shocked.
Really?
Yes. He said it is philosophy which will lead the world. Because ideology is at a dead end. So this philosophical approach, India must adumbrate this. So I think our intellectual institutions, our geopolitical thinking, our academic institutions, our public discourse will have to shift to, we are philosophic, but we should say this ideology is not going to work. That guts we don't have.
And also to begin
Because that we regard as politically incorrect.
and begin to think the Indian way.
We say this Indian way is, even when you are ideological, we have felt maybe you have a point. But you think we have no point. That's the problem. That is where the clash is. It is the clash between the inclusive and the exclusive. That's what Karl Popper said in 1945. That this is the paradox of tolerance. The tolerant will tolerate the intolerant to the point where the intolerant will destroy the tolerant. We should not allow that.
Thank you so much, Gurumurthy. Thank you very, very much, and deeply appreciate your gesture. Dear viewers, we have just completed this absolutely brilliant conversation from one of India's leading thinkers and intellectuals, as I said, and intellectual powerhouse. This has been a discussion in which we have talked about India's philosophy, India's civilizational roots, India's place in the world, and why India matters. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, and we will continue to bring you more such episodes, more such discussions in the future. Please do stay tuned. But till then, I wish you all goodbye and thank you very much for joining us. Namaskar.